What up, guys? Total Control 871. As I prepare to move forward with my appeals process and the prospect of that not being successful, I must get caught up on many of the videos that I've been meaning to do. They're very difficult to do videos. They deal with the abuse and the tyranny that I suffered at police, as well as other people. Today we are going to be talking about my October, I believe it was October the 3rd, 2014 arrest, unlawful arrest by New Jersey State Police. New Jersey State Trooper Sergeant Christopher Griffin conducted this. He helmed that arrest along with a slew of other state troopers. They came in unmarked vehicles, an armada, pointing their guns at me, ready to shoot and kill me. I was doing nothing more than sitting in my camping chair, just as I am right now. They came for me because I was electing suicide rather than live with poverty. I was going to commit suicide in front of the New Jersey State House, which I still very well, that is one of the venues that I very well indeed may, if I am forced to commit suicide, then the State House may very well indeed be one of the venues in which I elect to do that in front of. There are just so many guilty. You can only kill yourself once, and there are so many that are guilty that have led and that have culminated to this forced suicide. So, anyway, today's topic isn't really the topic of a possible impending suicide. Today's topic deals with the actions of state police when they unlawfully arrested me. Most people that I tell this story to, they're completely confused as to why some sort of a crisis, what they would call crisis intervention, or sent to a hospital, which would have ended up doing probably just as much damage to me, judging from my experience in the Atlantic City Medical Center's psychiatric ward, where I was threatened with rape if I did not comply with their test, their blood and urinalysis test. Psych nurse, his name was Chris Cantino, if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. I have not forgotten about him. I have not forgotten about any of these people. All of these people will be brought to justice one way or another. As long as the damage, as long as the trauma, as long as the night terrors remain, so will my need for vengeance. They will be brought to justice. They will be made to pay for their crimes. I am tired of being this thing where I am perceived as garbage because you are homeless, because you are poor, because you have been psychologically damaged, what they would call mental illness. There is a difference between being psychologically traumatized and mental illness. Mental illness is idiopathic. Mental illness is this thing where you hear about it a lot. We don't understand where it comes from. We struggle to understand it. We don't know why some people are this way, etc., etc. My psychological trauma, my psychological injury is highly quantifiable. Okay? Your so-called medical health professionals have played a part in destroying my mind. Back to October the 3rd, 2014. After the Armada came for me and arrested me with their guns drawn, they then transported me to the Buena Vista barracks. Buena Vista State Police Barracks. Outside was NBC correspondent Ted Greenberg. As soon as I saw him, I figured I would only have maybe about a minute, maybe even less, between exiting the police vehicle and entering the barracks, where presumably Mr. Greenberg would not be allowed. I very quickly cobbled together just 2 or 3 talking points that I could fire off very quickly about why suicide has become the only viable option for ending poverty, suffering, inequality, and of course what would eventually become police tyranny. But much to my surprise, I believe there was some sort of radio discussion between, I believe it was Sergeant Brown was the trooper that transported me from my cabin in the woods to the Buena Vista Barracks. I think this communication dealt with circumventing Ted Greenberg. Very unusual, very strange. Again, I'm not putting myself in the same category as mass shooters. Obviously, that's not my category. But remember when I said how the police agencies, how they work very hard at thwarting motive from becoming public. Okay? They work very hard at that. It was obvious that the state police did not want Mr. Greenberg to make part of the news why my suicide had become necessary. They did not want to give me that platform to sequester the truth. And this would become a reoccurring theme between myself, police agencies, and major corporate media. Okay, after I was processed at the Buena Vista Barracks, they then handcuffed me again, with my hands behind my back this time, and I have mobility and stability issues. Because I didn't have use of my hands prior, I had been handcuffed in front of me with like a waist tether. I could at least hold on to items. I was being transported by Sergeant Christopher Griffin and Sergeant Michael Gural, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, G-U-R-A-L, Gural. They refused to uncuff me so that I could climb into the back of the police vehicle. The language that they used was just throw yourself across the back seat. I have several physical disabilities. It was about this time that the stress from the ordeal began to cause my nose to bleed. I was not offered any kind of medical assistance. It wasn't a profuse nosebleed. It was just a bleed. I can tell you that at the end of, without jumping too far ahead, at the end of the incarceration, the 2 months of incarceration, the stress had proven so bad that to this day I have some sort of hearing impairment. It's hard for me to hear sometimes. Anyway, they were treating me like I was big game. That's the psychology of many law enforcement officers. I was their prize catch. I was their big game stag. I was their grizzly bear to just be hoisted across the hood of a car, or in this case, across the back seat of their police SUV. I injured my surgically rebuilt ankle climbing into this police vehicle with my hands cuffed behind my back. Moving on to the transport itself. As stated, you are perceived as an animal. You are perceived as big game. It wasn't enough that Sergeants Griffin and Griffin had made this unlawful arrest, but now they also felt the need to, in an attempt, psychologically humiliate their prize catch, myself. They began giving what I suppose you would call these ridiculous brain teasers or whatever. One of the things he said, because he says that he asked some woman this question that he had arrested before. If you're in a car and you're going 80 miles an hour and your destination is 80 miles away, how long will it take for you to get there? I guess he was looking to get a laugh if I were to, give an answer other than 1 hour. So he was looking for to be psychologically edified, to humiliate his prize catch, and when that didn't work, he went on to other things, namely to see if he could solidify a tangible, workable charge to work with. At this point, I had been charged with 2 charges, making terroristic threats and stalking. The stalking charge to this day, both charges completely baffle me. But I would later learn that the stalking charge has a no bail. So, without segueing too far off into the subject of criminal justice reform, it was quite clear that not only was Sergeant Griffin and Griffin willing to fabricate charges, create a police report that did not have a complaining victim, witness, whatever, but that they were even willing to just simply fabricate a charge that would completely forbid me from bailing out. Not that I had money to bail out anyway. These are the police tactics that are used. In the police report, Sergeant Griffin goes on to refer to me as being olive-skinned. Very unusual. Usually they would call it a light-skinned black male. In other words, Sergeant Griffin was trying very hard to craft a narrative that made me sound and look like a Middle Eastern terrorist. We'll pause a little bit here and talk something about Sergeant Griffin. Sergeant Griffin is, number one, who it is you see in our thumbnail participating in some obstacle course. I believe those dangly things are electrodes. They are electrically charged. Sergeant Griffin, he voted for Mitt Romney, was a volunteer firefighter, another occupation that's heavily dominated by white middle-class nepotism. And I believe he was in the military. If I'm not mistaken, I think the branch that he was in was the Air Force, if my investigation into his background is accurate. So, see, I know he, I don't know if he owns the boat or not, but like a lot of white men of his financial caliber, likes to go boating, fishing, things like that. Very conservative. Very conservative. His full name is Christopher Michael Griffin. That is a very solid Catholic name. Also, I will see if I can find the story again and then link it down below. I can't confirm for you it was the exact same Sergeant Christopher Griffin or not, but I couldn't imagine it being a different one. This report indicated that a Sergeant Christopher Griffin of New Jersey State Police leaked classified personnel information to outside sources, namely retired state police employees. The intel, the personal information was that of black African American state police applicants, recruits. The long and short of it was that Sergeant Griffin does not like black people. Sergeant Griffin felt that black people were desecrating his precious state police. Sergeant Griffin felt that black people have no place in the New Jersey State Police. That a type of affirmative action had diluted the qualifiers, that background screening process had been diluted to some degree, and he did not like that. Sergeant Griffin is a bigot, and he does not like me for blowing the whistle on this bigotry. He did not like me. He saw me, a mirage, as being what he wanted to see. That is Sergeant Griffin's background. Getting back to our transport now. My investigation into Sergeant Griffin did not prove terribly fruitful. Anyway, but he's an outdoorsy kind of person as well. During the transport, Sergeant Griffin and Griffin questioned me about several things. I see I'm hitting 20 minutes here. I'm trying to be quick as I can. Sergeant Griffin began to solicit a bribe from me, asking me about my personal injury, asking me how soon will I get money from my personal injury, telling me that if I get money for my personal injury, then that he might not, that the charges, he communicated to me that the it's very difficult to talk about. I don't know how to communicate that to you. It's very traumatic, very traumatic. I tell you what, before I talk about that, Sergeant Griffin gave me permission to make a phone call. Sergeant to whoever I wanted. I reached, and my hands were cuffed in back of me, but I could reach my personal belongings inside of a plastic bag seated next to me. In it was my phone, wallet, my keys. When I was being handcuffed, going back to my chosen name of Amir A. Mirage, Sergeant Griffin saw what he wanted to see when I asked him could he please double lock the handcuffs. He pounced on that, saying, aha, see, if you're so innocent, if you've never been charged, if you've never been in jail, then how do you know about double locking? That's what he was saying. And what he doesn't understand is that I've worked security my entire life. I'm a certified fire command officer. I've done, I'm certified AED, handcuff training, CPR. He didn't understand. He saw what he wanted to see. He wanted to see another black man with a lengthy criminal history, and that's what he saw, because that's what he wanted to see. So he gives me permission to make this phone call, and I call NBC again because I wanted them to know exactly what was going on at that moment. I believe it was Melissa Sign, Asian last name I believe it is, and I am explaining to her where I am at. I am handcuffed in the back of a police vehicle. I am being unlawfully charged with terroristic threats. I would later learn stalking, and I tried to communicate that. NBC, they ended up hanging up on me so much for getting the story. Again, major corporate media, they craft the narrative that they want. Move along here as quickly as I can. So I'm going to give abridged versions here because it's, number one, it's difficult for me to talk about the details. Number two, it's eating up a lot of time. Sergeant Griffin solicited a bribe from me, communicating to me that if I were to make monies available to him, that he would consider dropping these charges. Once he heard me on the phone and that I was speaking to NBC, Sergeant Griffin then with his right hand reached back and he punched me. Again, I'm still handcuffed. It was then that I activated the voice recorder on my phone being this very Galaxy Note 2. We're going to talk about that. That'll probably much be the last topic that we'll talk about, specifics anyway. I was very desperate to capture as much of their salacious conversation as I possibly could. The physical abuse, solicitation of a bribe, and I was catching all these things recorded. They continued to talk about these things. Unfortunately, my prime evidence was annihilated. Eventually, Sergeant Griffin reached back and forcibly removed this phone from my hand. He then went to power it down. Now, to this day, I don't know exactly what Sergeant Griffin understood or not when he did that. He made some sort of blurb or reference to a blue balloon popped up when he went to power down the phone. I was afraid of that. I knew what the blue balloon, the little speech bubble, you know, the phone's talking to you. I don't think he really read it or understood what it meant. Basically what it meant was that this particular incarnation of the Galaxy Note, the Galaxy Note 2, if you do not move to save what you have recorded with the voice recorder, unfortunately it will delete it. You know, it won't save it, or it won't save it to delete it, you know. And that's what happened. The phone got powered off and all of the evidence was annihilated. So after my 2 months of incarceration, when I was released to Etcher Street halfway house, I'll call it a halfway house. To this day, I'm not entirely sure as to exactly what its function is. It was the place where it was a large room and 2 bunk beds, like a hostel. And the very first thing I did, as soon as I got in there, they seal your phone when you're in jail up in like the plastic seal, like a drug test kit, that kind of a thing. I rip open the plastic, I power on the phone, and I immediately went to search for the recording, and unfortunately that recording was indeed lost. Now I paced back and forth wondering what in the world could I do to hold these law enforcement officials accountable for their actions. And I had to be very, very careful about what I did, because up until that point I had not committed any crime. Lying to the police is a crime. But what I decided to do was take a page out of the police interrogation playbook. I needed to put on the best bluff that I possibly could, but I couldn't do it by telling a lie. So from the very beginning, even when calling the state police, their internal investigation people, from the very beginning, either talk to people on the phone, when they eventually dispatched, I forgot the woman's name, I have it written down though somewhere, Sergeant Christopher, another Christopher, they like their Italian Catholics, state police, Christopher Bonilla, I'm probably mispronouncing that, Bonilla, something like that. So he takes my deposition, and I couldn't help but wonder, you know, had he already deposed Griffin and Griffin? And I was almost certain that he probably had, but either he or somebody in state police had already done so. And again, I had to be very careful. I had to choose my words very, very carefully here, that I did not tell a lie. I can actually and factually say that I cut on the voice recorder to my phone to capture what they were saying, and that is indeed the truth. I'm sure as the state police watch this video here, they'll probably dig out some of the old recordings, and they'll probably go through it. And when they do, they will see that in each and every instance I say that I activated the voice recorder. I never once actually said that I had a recording of Sergeant Griffin and Griffin making these claims to me. Also, in the claims, they were talking about how they didn't believe that I had activated the voice recorder to capture all of this, that I was not gay, that I needed to participate in a sex orgy to convert from being gay to straight, that all I needed was a woman, all of this. This is why I activated this voice recorder. Unfortunately, none of this was actually saved. I'm hitting 30 minutes here, so I desperately wanted to hold them accountable. Unfortunately, all that evidence has indeed been lost. I just simply wanted to give this detailed debriefing as to what happened to me, why I'm so traumatized. I need the world to know. So should the suicide become necessary, I just simply need you to know. I need you to know everything, because I fully understand neither police nor corporate media will ever give you the facts of what happened to me. They'll be more than comfortable of sitting back and just simply shrugging their shoulders and saying, you know, shaking their head, tisk, tisk, tisk. It's another case of mental illness. Oh my. Another idiopathic mind gone awry. Oh my, if only we could get a better handle. We need more mental health. We need more, you know, and that's all bullshit, because frankly, when you say more mental health, all you're doing is funneling a great deal of money into a wealthy medical oligarchy. You are putting no fucking dollars into the reason and the cause behind so much mental trauma, poverty, misery, utter despair. You don't seem to want to address any of this. You leave the most vulnerable of citizens to fend for ourselves, despite giving our lifeblood. 28 years of hard work. And yet I got a 25-year-old cousin in a multi-bedroom apartment with her and all her children. I worked longer than she's been alive. And I'm gonna die either in this tent or in a forced suicide at some venue of my choice. So much misery, so much trauma, so much abuse, and we're always expected to be a good sport about it. I can only give you the facts. Total Control 871.